So welcome to Pragmatism USA and PragmatismUSA.com. This is episode 1 of a series of videos that I'm frequently going to be doing about what Pragmatism USA stands for. You can follow me on PragmatismUSA.com. Email me at Igor@PragmatismUSA.com. That's IGOR at PragmatismUSA.com. Facebook at PragmatismUSA.com. YouTube at PragmatismUSA.com. Twitter, which won't let me use .com, so it is PragmatismUSA76, and Instagram also is PragmatismUSA76. There is no podcast, but I am working on that. So what is Pragmatism USA? And why not go with something traditional that looks at the Republican and Democratic parties? The reason it's not traditional is because both parties are a waste of time. Let's just acknowledge that right off the bat, that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are a waste of time. If you are a shill for Donald Trump, you are wasting your time. If you are a shill for anyone in the Democratic Party, including Barack Obama, you are wasting your time. These people are not your friends. They're not your heroes. They don't have your best interests at heart. But you keep electing them, which I just don't understand. Why do you keep putting these people into office? You complain about them all the time, say what a waste of time they are, inherently understand that they're a complete waste of time, and put them into the office nonetheless. I just don't get it. So what is the core problem here? The core problem is simple. Corruption. Both parties are entirely corrupt. I don't mean corruption in the traditional sense of what you would see in banana republics or third world countries, where what you have over there is someone that's cleanly giving somebody $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $100,000, whatever it may be, and saying, okay, well, now I've bought you, I own you. What we have instead in the United States is a much more difficult to see, but nevertheless, every bit as dangerous soft corruption. Our entire political system is built on money, and that is the acquisition of money by those who have it, and then the use of that money to influence politicians. You know, I love these politicians when they say, well, you know, I took money from this group, I took it from Microsoft, or I took it from AT&T, or I took it from this hospital group. But you know what? They didn't buy me. The hell they didn't. If you are one of these organizations that is giving money to a politician and getting nothing in return, then you are behaving in a way that nobody behaves. Go to your local Target, give them $50 and get nothing in return. Who would do that? Who does that? Nobody does that. If one of these corporations or one of these wealthy individual donors gives something to these politicians, then they expect something in return. And I don't mean in the traditional sense of bribery. Okay? These people aren't getting wealthy because someone from Microsoft or Facebook or whatever the hell you have, okay, United Healthcare is giving these people $50,000, okay, and they go out and buy a new BMW. Okay? Rather, it is a soft type of corruption that is money that is used to win elections. Mitch McConnell, who is an absolutely despicable human being, once was teaching a class on what it takes to win elections. Now, first of all, the notion of allowing a disease like Mitch McConnell to actually teach America's minds is sickening in its own right. But he goes in and he writes on the chalkboard 3 words: money, money, money. And this is very simple. Okay? You need money to win elections. You need money for TV advertisements. You need money for magazine advertisements. You need money to run Facebook campaigns and social media campaigns. And all of these politicians are bought and paid for. And if you think that your party is not and the other party is, then you're insane. Well, I keep hearing, well, Donald Trump can't be bought because he's wealthy. Are you high? Do you have any idea how many hundreds of millions of dollars Donald Trump has actually collected from various benefactors in order to run his campaign? You think he's paying for this on his own? The man is cheap. He's not paying for any of this on his own. That's insanity. And what, you think the Democratic Party is pure? That Barack Obama was pure? That Nancy Pelosi is pure? That Joe Biden is pure? These people are not your friends. The moment that they actually acquire this money from people who have paid them a great deal of it, then at that point, they are owned by them. None of these people are your friends. It is that simple. I do not understand why you bind yourself so easily to anybody on the Republican or Democratic side and think this person is my friend or this person is my friend. None of them can give a damn about you. They don't give a damn about you. Several years ago, Ronald Reagan gets up before the American people and says, government is not the solution to your problems. Government is the problem. You know, that's an awfully cynical way of looking at government. And actually, with our government, as ineffective and pathetic as it's been for the past several decades, I understand why someone should look at it that way. But government shouldn't be the damn problem. Government is actually supposed to be working for you. And let's bear something in mind. There is no divorcing us from the government. There is no divorcing you from the government. We are the government. If they suck, it is because we suck. The notion that somehow we can absolve ourselves of any kind of responsibility for our leadership is nonsense. We're the one who put these people in power. We voted for them. You voted for them. And then you turn around and you bitch about them. Well, who the hell is at fault for that? For actually putting these people into power in the first place? You want to blame someone else. Well, it's not my fault. I voted for the other guy. What the hell did you think the other guy was going to do? Or the other woman was going to do? You think they were going to be really that much better? Great. Okay. So instead of electing Donald Trump, then we would have elected Hillary Clinton a few years ago. Okay. Now Donald Trump is a catastrophe. There is no question about that. But Hillary Clinton is bad. Okay. Joe Biden is bad. Barack Obama was bad. All of these people are a pestilence upon America. Now, granted, Donald Trump may be the worst by far of any of them, and the worst that we've seen in a very long time, at least since Richard Nixon, and probably going back to Warren Harding. But at the same time, it's not as though the alternatives were going to be some kind of saviors. And by the way, one person is not going to solve everything. You have 535 people in Congress. You have administrative agencies. You have governors. You have senators. Okay? At the local level, representatives at the local level, mayors, and all of these people function the same way, okay? And the money continues to be a cancer at all levels. It is not about one person that you put into office. It is about the entire disease that has infected the body that is the United States. If the government is the problem, it is because we have allowed it to be the problem. No, government shouldn't be the solution to all of your problems, but it's supposed to actually create a structure where you can succeed, and it is not doing that right now. Or at least it's not doing it for the majority of Americans. For certain people, it is doing it very, very well. But the notion that government is the problem is nonsense. We are a nation of 330 million people. Do you really think that we can exist without a government and without a large government and without layers of government? This is impossible. We're going to have a government anyway, so make sure that we actually have good mechanisms of government. You're not going to do away with government. It is impossible. You cannot govern a nation as large and complicated as ours without an equally large and complicated bureaucracy. It's not going to happen. Just make it better. And the people who are in there right now sure as hell aren't going to make it better. So we've looked at what Pragmatism USA is not for. So what is it for? Well, let's look at some of the issues. And let's start with an underlying principle. Okay? I don't really care what your belief is, nor should you care what my belief is. It's not about belief, it's about what works. The bottom line is there are a lot of elements of the United States right now that are not working. And then there are people out there who are saying, well, this is my political ideology is this, less government. That's not a political ideology, that's an aspirational pie in the sky way of looking at things. You have to focus on what works. And we know that there are certain things that work because we know that other countries have tried them and they are functional. We also know what doesn't work because we know we've tried in this country before and it isn't functional. Just focus on what works. Now, of course, that is much easier said than done. Well, hell, everything is easier said than done. But nevertheless, okay, it's not just about whether you're coming from the right or the left. Just take a look at actually what works. Sometimes it's going to line up with your beliefs on the right. Sometimes it's going to be on the left. Them's the breaks. But just focus on what works. And let's start looking at some of these issues. Number one, campaign finance. This is very, very basic. We are not going to accomplish anything in this country, and nothing will get better in this country until we have public financing of elections. The cancer that is at the core of our country is money, and you have to remove it, and you have to cut it out completely. Until you get money out of politics, nothing's going to happen, and you will not be getting money out of politics until you have public financing of elections. Other countries have been able to do it. There's no reason why we can't do it. And it's not just about one decision. Everyone talks about Citizens United, although everything was just fine before Citizens United. Citizens United was more gasoline on the fire, but this was an inferno that was out of control before. This goes back to another decision in Buckley versus Vallejo. Okay? But even before that, money has been a cancer for a long time. You need public financing of elections. You got to get the lobbyists out of there. Congress and every state legislature is festooned with lobbyists. It is people running around over there representing various corporate interests saying, I will give you this and you will give me that in return. Okay? You got to get them out of there. There's no reason for these people to be there. Congress has enormous staffs. The state legislature has staffs, and if they need bigger ones, that's fine if we're going to have public financing of elections. I'm willing to provide government with more resources if we can get the lobbyists, these snakes, out of there. And then what we have also is a revolving door. If you are in Congress right now, great, good for you, okay? Half of you are going to end up being lobbyists. Are you kidding me? How in the hell do we allow something like this? This is the way that a lot of these people actually become millionaires, because they know that a congressional salary just doesn't pay them that much relative to what they can make as lobbyists. You can't allow this. You have to get all this corruption out of there. It is at the core of every single problem. You give me a problem and I'm going to give you the answer. That answer is corruption. Corruption. Corruption is the reason that our economy looks the way that it does. Who does the American economy work for? When we have the top 1% controlling more and more and more of the wealth, and we have greater numbers of poverty and a shrinking middle class, well, who in the hell do you think the economy works for? You know, in the 1960s or the 1970s, on one income, okay, you could buy 2 cars, buy a house, save for your retirement, send your kids off to college, go on vacations, live comfortably. How many people can do that now? And these were people oftentimes who were doing this without a college education. You can't do that anymore. That is a failure of America because things just are not working the way that they did before. You know, Trump talks about make America great again. Well, aside from all of the inherent problems, basically, that something like that actually believes, how about we make America fair again? How about we go back to that time when one person actually could provide for their families working reasonably 40 hours a week, not working all the time right now, not getting bled dry by expensive childcare costs, college costs, healthcare costs. This is no longer an America that works for the vast majority of Americans. Why? Because of corruption. Because especially since the 1980s when Reagan came into power, all of the wealth has been shifting upward. It used to be that your average CEO was making about 20 times what a worker was making. Now it's about 300 times. How in the hell does that benefit America? Why are we protecting the wealthiest members of our country? What is the point of that? When everyone else suffers. And I keep hearing this crap. Well, it's not about how the pie is distributed. It's about making the pie bigger. Nonsense. It is exactly about how the pie is distributed, because the pie is not going to be big forever. It's not going to grow forever. This is a planet with finite resources. And what matters is how you actually distribute those resources. Yes, you can grow the economy, but we have not grown our way into prosperity, because even though the overall wealth in this country has grown, it is now being much more unequally distributed. Now, I keep hearing about, well, socialism. I don't want socialism. I don't want socialism. First of all, that's a meaningless term. Okay, I'm sick and tired of hearing it. I'm not going to say whether I'm for it or against it, because really it's stupid. We've completely corrupted the term anyway. Okay? But I do know this. Capitalism needs to be regulated. And we have seen the devastating effects of what happens when capitalism is unregulated. Child labor, exploitation of workers. We continue to see this all over the world. No sick pay, no benefits, environmental degradation. Is that what we want, really? We need to regulate it. Because the reality is that businesses, the bigger they get, they are run by human beings. Human beings, we are flawed, we are greedy, and we are selfish. We need our worst instincts oftentimes to be regulated. Capitalism is no different than any other human endeavor. It needs to be regulated. And right now, all we're saying is, well, I want to get rid of taxes and regulations. Great. Which ones do you want to get rid of? Because just saying I want to get rid of regulations doesn't mean anything. You want to get rid of environmental regulations? Great. You can drink brown water, okay, while they're drilling poison into your fields. And then your children are consuming it. That's what you want? Until we have an economy that works like this, the greatest good for the greatest number, it's going to continue to be dysfunctional. It doesn't matter how big the economy is, as much as it matters where the resources of the economy go. And by the way, when there is equal distribution, or something remotely, or at least forget equal, okay, when there is fairer distribution in the economy, you're going to get a bigger economy as well. The bottom line is, we're going to be capitalistic for the foreseeable future. The European countries are capitalistic. Japan is capitalistic. Canada, Australia, that's fine. But they have to be regulated. And they're regulated a lot more in other countries, and they're getting a lot more fair outcomes in those countries. We can do the same thing. Talk about raising the minimum wage. Why the hell wouldn't you raise the minimum wage? It's tough for people out there. Look what's happened to housing prices. What, it's somehow bad that somebody's going to be getting $15 an hour because the price of your burger is going to go up by 3 cents or 4 cents? I'm sorry, but I'm willing to pay more for people to suffer less. And then we look at other things too. We are one of the only industrialized democracies in the world, maybe the only industrialized democracy in the world, without some form of paid maternity leave. Think of how basic this is. We are talking about parents forming bonds with their children at a very important age. Mothers need that. Fathers need that. And we won't actually require our companies to pay for that. Why? What is the point of that? How is that an improvement to our society? By the way, while we're at it, let's talk about healthcare. We are the only industrialized democracy in the world that does not have some form of universal healthcare. How is this possible? I mean, for God's sakes, it's healthcare. You're not doing anything if you're dead, if you're sick. You're not accomplishing anything. And at the same time, we can't actually even insure our citizens. Now, we talked before. First of all, let's get a few things out of the way about our system. Obamacare sucks, okay? Because Obamacare was a half-hearted measure. Now, I think that Barack Obama genuinely did start with a good plan at heart. But then what happened? Corruption. That is what happened. Because the AMA, the American Medical Association, which has been fighting universal health care ever since Teddy Roosevelt, okay, got in and said, well, we need this. And insurance companies got in and said, well, we need this. And hospitals got in and said, we need this. And pretty soon, Barack Obama of Santa Claus, here you go, here you go, here you go. And you take a plan that could have been a decent plan at one point and you completely screw it up. And then the Republicans talk about Obamacare like it's evil. Well, what the hell is your alternative? Because in the past 10 years, I haven't heard them come up with a single alternative. More competition. Give me a break. Okay? We'll get into the problems with that approach later. But let me tell you what the Republican healthcare plan is. There is no plan. There is absolutely no plan. Trump going around talking about, well, we're going to replace Obamacare with something great. Shut the hell up. Okay? That doesn't mean anything. You actually need to work on the details of it. Obamacare does have some elements that are actually quite important. For example, okay, we need coverage for pre-existing conditions. You can't kick people out because they have pre-existing conditions. But at the same time, it's gotten so expensive that basically we have nominal health care, but we still have too many people without health care. And when you've got a deductible, an annual deductible of $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, $12,000, what the hell kind of a health care policy do you have? That's not health care. That's not a healthcare plan. Listen, I'm not tied to a Canadian-style system if it works great, or a British-style system if it works great. But we need to come up with something. I'm all ears if somebody can come up with some kind of a system. But you know what we should be doing? We should be robbing other countries of their ideas. Several years ago, Taiwan was a very poor country, but through industrialization, it actually developed quite a bit. And then they realized that they had a healthcare problem. They needed to get healthcare to their citizens. So they did something that we used to do before we started thinking in America that we know everything. Okay? What they did is they looked at a bunch of other countries in the world. And they said, okay, well, what works? Let's take a look at Switzerland. Let's take a look at Canada. Let's take a look at the UK. Let's take a look at the US. And you know what they came up with? Basically American-style Medicare. And it works for them. But maybe it works for them because they don't have the same goddamn levels of corruption that we do. How is it that every industrialized democracy in the world can solve this problem, but we can't? How is it that our premiums go up all the time and our services don't get any better? Because of coronavirus? There are figures out there that are saying that our healthcare premiums may rise by 40% next year. 40%! How many Americans at that point are going to be priced out of healthcare? So we've got one side over here that's defending Obamacare and saying, oh, this is wonderful. And the other side saying, well, we're going to replace it with something great. Okay, you had 10 years to come up with the plan and you didn't do anything. I don't think the Republicans have a plan for healthcare. And I think the Democrats basically just want to protect Obamacare. Either way, you're going to have to deal with this issue. I want to talk about an issue that really doesn't get enough coverage at all. But this is a foundational issue. Let's talk about education. Now, this is really near and dear to my heart because I was a teacher for 10 years and now I'm a lawyer who represents kids. For 20 years I've been doing this and I see our education system and all of the unbelievable flaws in it. 52.3% of children in public schools are below the poverty level. 52.3%. Folks, this is a national scandal. This is a disgrace. More than half of our kids in public schools are in poverty? How in the hell did we allow our schools and our economic situation to get into a condition like this? And poor kids, God bless them, they can do so well and they can try so hard, but they come from challenging circumstances and we know that poverty is generational. You're not going to fix your schools in a vacuum. You got to fix the schools, but you got to fix the society around the schools as well. Because right now, we're sending a bunch of poor, hungry kids who are coming oftentimes from difficult families into schools, handing them off to teachers and say, you know what? You solved the problem. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You want to fix schools, you got to invest in them. And yes, that starts by paying teachers more, a hell of a lot more, because let me tell you something. Teachers are the best people in the world, and they are the most important people in the world. And as a society, we would be completely screwed without them. We can get rid of a lot of elements of society, and we will suffer, but we will not suffer anywhere near as much as if we didn't have teachers. Why are you asking a teacher to go and work for $40,000 a year, $45,000 a year? How long is that person going to last? Especially when you're asking them to work so hard. My wife is a teacher. She works for peanuts and she busts her ass doing it. A lot of the best people I know on this planet are teachers. They bust their ass doing it and they get paid nothing. So what you're asking of schools right now is, I want top quality schools, I want outstanding performance, and I want it cheap. What part of Earth works like that? People don't work like that. You want to go out and want to get good services, you got to pay for them. You've got to pay for them. And if that means that I have to pay a little bit more in my property taxes or my sales taxes to pay teachers, screw it, I'm for it. I'm perfectly okay with it, because at that point you're making an investment in kids. And you're making an investment in the people who teach your kids. Instead of whining about it and how much you have to pay in property taxes, it's much better for you to simply say thank you. Thank you for actually doing for my kids what I cannot do. A lot of people right now are sitting at home and they have to be put in the position of educating their kids, okay, because of coronavirus, because it shut down the schools. And I'm hearing a lot of whining about how hard it is to educate one kid or two kids, and it's their own kid. Well, think about how hard it is when you have to educate a classroom of 30 or 35 kids and they're not yours. Okay? It's a damn hard job. Teachers need to be paid properly. And private schools are not the answer. The notion that private schools are doing better than public schools is nonsense. They are cherry picking upper middle class and upper class kids with all the advantages. They're not dealing with the same things that public schools are, and they're sure as hell not dealing with special ed kids. So if you think that the solution to public schools is privatization, well, I've got a bridge to sell you, because that's a bunch of crap. Nowadays, we have a lot of discussion of waiving everyone's student loans. Let's spend $1.5 trillion and just wipe the slate clean on student loans. I don't think that's a good idea. Sure, everyone wants their loans gone, but it's not a good idea. This is a form of class warfare. Now, in many respects, I'm okay. First of all, class warfare. There's class warfare right now. It's the rich versus everybody else. And if we're going to have class warfare, I say we declare it back on the rich. But I'm not in favor of the lower middle class, the middle class and the upper middle class, and the lower class all going at it. Okay, so now you're going to give a bunch of people who went to college a waiver on their loans. What do you do with people who didn't go to college? What about people who went to vocational schools? And by the way, and what are you going to do for future generations? Okay, are they going to incur more loans? And at that point, are you going to be waiving those too? This doesn't solve the root problem. The root problem is that college has become unaffordable. College has been rising for the past several years at what? An annual rate of inflation in college of what, 12%? That's basically 4 times, if not more, the normal rate of inflation for the rest of the economy. Why are college costs getting so out of control? Why is college so expensive? And by the way, this becomes an economic productivity issue as well. Because if you have all of these millennials and other generations that are just trying to pay down debt for college, they're not going to be using that money productively in other ways. They're not going to be spending it on consumer goods. And the consumer spending is what, 70% of our economy? They're not going to be buying houses. They're not going to be buying cars. It's an issue. People cannot just graduate all the time with $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 worth of debt. People are sending their kids to a public school for $25,000 to $30,000 a year. What the hell is public about that? Yes, you got to deal with the cost of college, but I don't think that wiping the slate clean is automatically going to solve all problems. Let's talk about climate change. First of all, if you don't believe in climate change, you're an idiot. I don't know what else to call you, okay, but you're an idiot. Climate change is real. The planet is in a really bad way. Okay? We know that the planet is going to suffer in the coming decades. It's not a matter of whether, it's a matter of how bad. Whether it's going to suffer, that question has been resolved. Yes, we're all going to suffer. How bad is it going to be? We have an overwhelming amount of scientists right now who believe that man-made climate change is actually going to wreak havoc on the earth, that we are responsible for this. And here's the thing. I'm not an expert on science. I'm not a scientist, but I know how to read them. And I know how to defer to them. And if 97% of scientists, and those are the figures, at least 97% of climate scientists believe in man-made climate change, I'm going to believe it. The skeptics out there, none of their claims are actually rooted in fact. Now, this is the one area where I think the left actually is right. And even parts of the right, at least the younger parts of the right, are at least starting to come around. But what are we going to do? Because we haven't taken any meaningful steps to address climate change at all. Okay? It's not going to be some kind of magical technology that's going to go along and do this. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. There's going to have to be some sacrifice. And you've got to invest in things that are actually going to deal with this. Because if we keep waiting and waiting and waiting, by the time it becomes a massive problem, it's going to be too late. That bill is going to be due at some point. You got to deal with it. Now, I don't know if the Green New Deal is the answer. Frankly, I haven't looked at it closely enough. But you got to do something. You can't just bury your head in the sand and say the earth is going to be fine. My favorite argument against climate change, just in its sheer idiocy, is that, oh, how arrogant is it to believe that we as human beings can affect the earth this much? How arrogant is it to not believe that? We are without question the most destructive species on earth. Look how many animals have actually been wiped out under us. The ozone layer has become a problem under us. We've caused droughts. Look how many other plant species actually have been negatively affected. Insects, 70%, we have 70% less insects now than we did several decades ago. It is really arrogant to believe that us, as the most damaging and invasive species on the planet, is not actually causing harm. And what does this require you to do? This isn't a matter of belief. It's the science. It doesn't matter what you believe. The science is out there and it proves you wrong if you don't think that climate change is real, because the hell it isn't. Let's talk about the military. Let's get something clear. Both sides want to go to war. Okay? We think, well, you know, the Republicans, they're always going to want to go to war, but the Democrats don't want to. What was the vote in Congress when we were deciding on whether to go to war in Iraq? The vast majority of Democrats supported it. The support was even greater for war in Afghanistan. Both sides want to send you to war. And virtually every war that the United States has fought since World War II, if not every war, is unnecessary. Did we have to fight the Korean War? No, that was a waste of time. The Vietnamese War? No, that was a waste of time. The first Iraq intervention? Okay, maybe there was something to it. I'm still pretty skeptical about that. Okay. More and more, actually, I believe that it wasn't necessary, but at least the first George Bush, give him some credit for going in there and then getting the hell out. Okay. His son is an idiot, and he decides to start this extremely expensive, catastrophic, murderous war that we're still dealing with right now, and the repercussions of it. Same thing in Afghanistan. We've been there for years, and what the hell have we accomplished? And I'm just talking here about the major conflicts. I'm not talking about some of our other interventions in Central America, in South America, in the Far East. These things are a waste of time. And when Democrats tell you, well, we're not in favor of war, don't believe them. Because what evidence have you actually seen that that's true? These wars have taken place on Democratic watches, they've taken place on Republican watches, and all of them are a waste of time. And how often do we have conversations about pulling our troops from around the world? Why are we having a bigger conversation about pulling our troops out of the Middle East? It's only a matter of time until we get involved into another nasty war down there because we're stupid and we can't help ourselves. And if you think that someone's going to keep you out of war because they're a Democrat or a Republican, again, I got a bridge to sell you. Neither party can be trusted to keep you out of war. The Korean War was started by a Democrat. The Vietnamese War, or the Vietnam War, also was primarily carried on by a Democrat. And it had ruinous effects as well with a Republican. Neither side can be trusted on this. Period. Let's talk about taxes. You got to get rid of the corporate loopholes. How is it possible that an organization like Amazon pays zero taxes? This is a scandal. We have pretend numbers on taxes. Well, the tax rate is 15%, or the tax rate is 20%. No, if you've got good enough accountants, and you've got good enough lobbyists, and you have greased palms enough, the tax rate for you is zero. Congratulations. Have you ever seen the tax code? It's enormous. I'm a lawyer. I can't understand it. I don't have a... I read 2 words of it, like and the, and I'm lost. And you're telling me that people are supposed to actually understand it? How is it that in other countries, people can do their taxes in an hour, in 2 hours? They can sit down once a year, do their taxes, they're done. For us, we have to keep an entire fleet of accountants working. We have to pay one of these massive accounting groups every year a huge amount of money to deal with our taxes. The tax code is far too complicated, has too many loopholes, and doesn't work for you. And yeah, it's time to raise taxes on the wealthy. Oh, class warfare. Again, spare me, okay? We've been engaged in class warfare for decades, for centuries, for millennia. And it's always been the rich fighting the poor. Don't pretend that we're not in the middle of a class war right now, because we certainly are. But it's a class cold war, and it's subtle. But now you got to get the rich to pay taxes. Do you know what the top excise tax rate was under Dwight Eisenhower in the 1950s, a Republican? It was 91%. Now, do I suggest that we go back to a rate like that? No. But other countries do have much more progressive tax systems than we do. And you know what? They're doing just fine. They have much higher taxes, especially on the wealthy, in Western Europe and Canada and Japan and Australia than we do. And they're doing just fine. Those countries haven't fallen apart yet. We can't seem to get this right. And I keep hearing this thing, well, you're punishing the rich for being rich. Okay, stop. If you benefit the most from the system, it is your obligation to pay the most into the system. If you are Jeff Bezos, if you are Bill Gates, if you are Warren Buffett, congratulations, you've benefited the most from the system, now pay it back. Okay? And I don't mean through philanthropic measures, no, pay your damn taxes. I will tell you one of the most frustrating, irritating issues that we have right now is immigration. Because really, folks, the vast majority of Americans agree on what we need in immigration. I think if you were to just separate the politics out of it and say, do you agree with this, with this, with this? Are you opposed to this, this, and that? Probably about 70 to 80% of people would agree. But we have allowed the extremists on both sides to control the narrative. Okay? The right. Nobody comes in. Okay? Every Mexican is coming to take your job. Are you insane? Really? Do you really think that people from Latin America are actually coming over here to take your job? Folks, they're doing jobs that Americans just won't do. Okay? Do you really think, okay, that the typical American is going to go into a field on a 98-degree day and bust their ass for 8, 10, 12 hours a day for $11 an hour working out in those in fruit and vegetable fields? Are you high? Are you insane? Americans aren't going to do that for that kind of money. Thank God we have people coming in from other countries to actually feed us, because we sure as hell can't do it ourselves. Okay? And what is it? That people from Latin America are coming over here and taking your job as what? A computer engineer? A lawyer? A doctor? A scientist? Give me a break. Okay? We should thank these folks for actually coming in and feeding us and constructing our buildings. Okay? And a lot of them are damn good people. Okay? Donald Trump, you're calling them rapists? Go to hell. Give me a break with this nonsense. If you believe that, you're just out of control. And actually, at that point, you're just being used by someone else to hate them because you blame them for the fact that you're not making enough. No, the reason that you're not making enough money is not because of someone from Latin America or someone from Mexico. It's because you have a bunch of corruption that has allowed a bunch of rich people to game the damn system. But we have extremists on the left as well. Let everybody in. Open borders. No country in the world has a system like that. You got to have some control over your borders. You can't let everybody in. And I understand, okay, I hear this all the time from the left. This is stolen land. I understand this. What we did to the Native Americans is an absolute catastrophe. Okay, that is our original sin. That and slavery are our two original sins as Americans. But at the same time, you can't just let everybody in. Okay, what I keep hearing is abolish ICE. Well, okay, ICE has had all kinds of problems, and right now, the way that it's being used by Donald Trump, okay, as an instrument to cause suffering is unacceptable. But at the same time, you have to have some kind of an enforcement mechanism out there. There is no law without enforcement. So what do we need? Well, first of all, I keep hearing these stories all the time about ICE raiding some kind of a meatpacking plant out there, for example, rounding up a bunch of undocumented immigrants and punishing them. Why in the hell aren't you actually punishing the companies that hired them if you're that concerned about undocumented immigration or illegal immigration or whatever you want to call it? You know, if you actually wanted to stop it, you could. Okay? Back in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to undocumented immigrants. Why? Because he was acting out of the goodness of his heart? No. Because he was a social justice warrior liberal? Hell no. Okay? Because the U.S. Chamber of Commerce wanted him to do it because they needed the cheap labor. So they went after poor people, brown people, instead of actually going after the companies that were hiring them. You want to deal with the undocumented immigration? Great. Start throwing people in jail. But not the undocumented immigrants. How about you actually throw the people who are hiring them into jail if you're really serious about it? Here's what we need. We need more visas for skilled workers. You know what? I want the best minds from Latin America, from China, from India, from Pakistan coming over here. Because you know what? Those people are pretty damn important. And if we take their best people and bring them over to America, and they make us stronger, hell yes, I want them. And a lot of them are damn good people, too. Okay? We need more agricultural visas. That way we can actually monitor the folks who are coming over here. If they want to come over here and do these jobs that us Americans won't do, and give me a break, we won't do them, and certainly not at this pay. It's backbreaking labor for very little pay. Okay? Then you need to have more visas for them. And then you can monitor them. Yes, you need some border controls. Now, building a wall is idiotic. Okay? Other countries can control their borders without building walls. But no, you know what? You want border controls? Great. Punish the employers who hire undocumented immigrants. But at the same time, have visas that allow immigrants to come in here with authorization. They could be permanent, like with our skilled workers, or they could be seasonal. But either way, at least at that point, you can follow them. Okay? You do need a path to citizenship for people who are undocumented if they've been here long enough, if they follow the law, if they become productive citizens. Hell, let's say somebody came here from Mexico in 1998, has raised their kids over here, has been contributing to our society, hasn't engaged in any kind of criminal activity. Why wouldn't you want that person to become an American? What's wrong with that? I want good people in this country. And DACA, come on now. You know, I spent several years working with a lot of kids who were undocumented from Mexico. They came here when they were 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. Wonderful kids. Okay, really good kids. And they're terrified. A lot of them are really smart kids. They could be productive kids, but they can't get papers. There's something wrong with that. We're not supposed to be a cruel country. I mean, I look at all these kids that we put down in cages at the border, and it sickens me. This is what we are as Americans? We're okay with this? Yes, we need to control the borders, but you got to do it humanely. And you can't have completely open borders. It's not going to work, and yes, you have to have some enforcement mechanisms. And finally, let's talk about crime. Let's start with the basic acknowledgement that the drug war is idiotic, okay, and has been a complete failure. Now, I am not in favor of all decriminalization. I think that's a bad idea. But at the same time, we do need to soften things quite a bit. What I would want to prioritize in our criminal justice system is violent crimes. We have too many people in our jails who are there for nonviolent crimes and for drug offenses. If you are a violent menace to society, hell yes, I want you in prison. Okay, I'm not one of these people who says, give them a slap on the wrist. Or, our jails are a cesspool. They are, okay? So we shouldn't be sending, these violent offenders to jail. No, I don't think so. If you're violent, you belong in jail. But you know who else I want in jail? White-collar criminals. How is it that we had dozens, hundreds, thousands of people destroy our economy in 2007 and 2008? Nobody went to jail for it. How is it that you can constantly perpetrate fraud in the United States and nobody goes to jail for that? You know what I want to do? I'm going to put all the white-collar criminals in the same place as the violent criminals go. Because right now what we're prioritizing is actually beating up on communities of color, while at the same time really either ignoring white-collar crime altogether or minimizing it. And then we have private prisons. Have we lost our minds? The single most fundamental power that any government has is the power to strip you of your liberty. How in the hell have we turned that over to private prisons? What is wrong with us that we would do something like that? That this is a for-profit endeavor. By the way, these prisons too, they're far more dangerous than the government-run prisons. But we've gotten into our heads that private industry does everything better than government, so we got to have private prisons. They're a bad idea. They're a horrible, horrible idea. And let's talk about gun control. Look, the Second Amendment exists. We got, about 400 million guns in this country? You're not going to take everyone's guns from them, okay? That's a pipe dream, okay? And actually, because I do believe in the Constitution, you got to respect the Second Amendment. But we've got a small group of people out there who believe that any regulation, no matter how reasonable, no matter how minor, is a direct assault on the Second Amendment, and that's just craziness, okay? You have to have some reasonable gun controls. I'm sorry. If your gun allows people to actually, or makes it easier for people to go in there and commit mass atrocities against your fellow Americans, I don't want you to have that gun. We need some rational regulations. And by the way, this is again where both parties have let you down. Okay, we already know the Republican Party and how they feel about this. They don't take any kind of gun control seriously. You can forget it. But the Democratic Party, they do a great job of lip service, but it never works. Okay, it never works. And what does all this go back to? It's the same thing that we talked about at the beginning. It is corruption. As long as you have this soft corruption of paying off politicians so they can get reelected and reelected and reelected and continuing to work for the wealthy instead of you, you're going to continue to have these problems. Why do you continue to put these people into power? And the amazing thing is that we have Americans out there who are saying, you know what? Washington is broken. Yes, it is. Congress sucks. Yes, it does. The president sucks. Yes, he does. Okay, but my congressperson, they're great. No, they aren't. No, they aren't. We got 535 members of Congress. We got one president. Okay. If you voted for Donald Trump or you voted for Hillary Clinton in the last election, you voted for corruption. If you vote for Donald Trump or you vote for Joe Biden in this election, you're voting for corruption. And chances are, if you vote for one of the 535 members of Congress in the November election, most likely you are voting for corruption. What do representatives and senators spend the bulk of their time doing? Getting on the phone and begging people for money. That's what you're putting into office. And until that stops, nothing is going to get better. Corruption is at the core of the problems in America. It is America's cancer. That's it for episode 1.